In this video, we're going to go over Chapter 7. We'll start with 7.1, greatest common factor, and factor by grouping. So we are on page 89 of your workbook. So we have this definition here. Finding the greatest common factor. The factored form of a number or expression is the expression written as a product of factors. The greatest common factor, or we often say GCF, of a polynomial is the largest polynomial that is a factor of all terms in the polynomial. So it has to go into every single one. So we're looking at what is the biggest number or monomial, as we'll get to later, but what's the biggest value that goes into the every term. So we're going to look at find the GCF of 12 and 18 in example 7.1 to start with. So we can just like relate back to how it works with numbers, something that you're familiar with and you've done before. So here we have 12 and 18, and you may just right off the bat say, well, that's 6, but let's have a systematic way of writing it out. So we would have 18, and that would break down to, if we wanted to do a tree diagram here, prime factor tree, 2 times 9, and then 9 breaks down to 3 times 3. And I usually like to circle my primes so I know. So that breaks down to 2 times 3 times 3, or actually, let's write it as 2 times 3 squared, because that's what it's going to look like when we have variables, right? So we have this value. If we multiplied it back, we would get 18, right? So they're like one and the same. So now this is just some side work I'm doing over here. And again, you can do it in your head for some of these and it should become more natural, but I just want you to have a systematic approach. So 12 would break down to 2 times 6, and then 6 breaks down to 2 times 3. So again, we have these primes. We would list that out as 2 times 2 times 3, and then 2 squared times 3 using exponent notation. And if we multiply that back, we in fact get 12. So we're good there. Now we're going to take those values, and for the GCF, we want to write what is shared. What is the same on there? So we've done this before with lowest common multiple, where we wanted to multiply out every distinct prime. It was a different thing. We were looking for what is the smallest number that these divide into, but now we're looking at what divides into them. So we have to take the things with the smaller powers, not the larger. So this is like to the 1, right? So we would only want to look at 2 to the first power and 3 to the first power is what we have shared here. So my GCF would be 2 to the first, or just actually 2 times 3, which is my 6 that I can figure out in my head. I just want you to have a method. So when you can't do it in your head, or it just looks a little awkward, you have something to think back on that's more concrete. So now we're going to take that same process and apply it to some monomials. So find the greatest common factor of 8a cubed b squared and 16a squared b cubed and 20a cubed b cubed. So if we think about kind of picking it apart, we can look at the number parts first, just the coefficients. So we have 8, we have 16, and we have 20. So if we break those down into their prime factorization and write them as exponent form, 8 would be 2 cubed, 16 would be 2 to the 4th, and 20 would be 2 squared times 5, 4 times 5. So again, we're looking for what's shared amongst them. So there's no other 5s. So 5's out. just get rid of that. 2 squared is the one with the smallest exponent, so that will divide in. If we go too big, it won't divide in. Like if we picked 16 to put in, that doesn't divide into 8 without it being a fraction. We want to have integer answers here. So we're going to look at 2 squared, which is 4. And again, you probably know that in your head. I'm just showing you a method. So we have the GCF here would be 4. So we're just tracking that. And then the next set of things are my A's. So I'm going to look at A cubed, I'm going to look at A squared, and I'm going to look at A cubed on the third one. So I'm just listing out what's in all the A's. And then that's easy. Just pick the one with the lowest exponent there. So A squared is the GCF on that. And then do the same with the B's. It is really easier to deal with the letters than the numbers, actually. B squared, B cubed, and B cubed. So we want the lowest one. So again, we're going to pick B squared. So we have a GCF of B squared. So again, we want the smallest exponent on these so that they divide into it. So then our answer is going to be GCF overall would be 4A squared B squared. We're just putting that all together. Now, once you get used to this, you will just do it in one piece. You're just gonna like, okay, the number is 4, picking the smallest power is A squared and B squared. It will come very naturally, but I just, again, want to get you started in the right direction in case you have never seen these kind of things before or worked with exponents and greatest common factor. So now we're on page 90 of your workbook, 7.1.2, factoring the greatest common factor. So we are going to look at when we have binomials, trinomials, or other polynomials, and we call it pulling out a greatest common factor, or just really what you're doing is looking what's common to every term, and you're writing that, out front, and then what's left just stays in the parentheses. So you have to kind of think like, how did this pick apart? So I'm going to show you really piece by piece how it picks apart. And then again, you're going to fine tune that and you're going to do it much more streamlined when you actually do it. If you're already at that stage or you jump there quickly, that's totally fine. So here we have factor out the GCF of 4x minus 12. So first we have to find the greatest common factor. So that would be 4. So I could split this apart as 4 times x minus 4 times 3. So that's my GCF is the 4. So what I do with the GCF, and I'm kind of showing you this split apart way for a very specific reason, because when we do factor by grouping, it'll make sense. So I take that and I pull it out front, so to speak. I'm going to use a darker color here. And then what's left here, you can see, like I would have to put x minus 3 there in order to get back to where I started. So then you're going to check. And you would check by just distributing. 4x minus 12 is the same, right? So that's your verification in step 4. Okay, so this is to go through what they have here. This is step 1, figuring out, what the GCF is, right? And then rewriting it as a product, which is, I kind of did those all at the same place. And then step 3, write it as a product of the GCF and the remaining factors in parentheses. So make sure you keep your signs or your operation symbol, I should say, intact. And then this is the verification here, step 4. For example, 7.4, you might want to pause the video and try this one yourself, but I'll go through it as well. So we're first going to figure out the GCF, so that's step 1. So if I look at 10x to the 6th minus 20x to the 4th plus 15x to the 3rd, I will have a common factor of 5. So I'm going to look at my numbers, 10, 20, and 15, what goes into them without any remainders. And then we have x to the 6th, x to the 4th, x cubed. So we're going to pick the one with the smallest exponent. Now I'm going to write that, so that's step 1. Now I'm going to write that as a product. So I would have 5x cubed times the 10x to the 6th. So I'm dividing that 5x cubed back into 10x to the 6th, and I would get 2x cubed. So you can write that out if you want, like the polynomial division we did earlier, or you can just kind of think like, okay, I have 5 times what gives me 10, x cubed times what gives me x to the 6th. That's how I do it. Then you will have the next set, you would have 5x cubed, and then I think what times 5 gives me 20 is 4. What times x cubed gives me x fourth would be x. Okay, plus. Then again, I have my 5x cubed. And then 5 times what gives me 15? That would be 3. And then x cubed is just 1. So I just leave it like that. So now the third step is I'm going to take what's in orange here, my GCF, and pull that out front. And all that's left in the purple here, including the operation symbols, is going to get left in parentheses. 2x cubed minus 4x. So you just kind of have to, leap over there, plus 3. Then I'm going to verify, and I'll write that in red. So I'm just going to distribute back, so just to make sure I have 10x to the 6th minus 20x to the 4th plus 15x cubed. And is that what I started with? Yes. So I check to make sure. Now you can skip this part, number 2. Often we don't write that out. That's cumbersome. I think most of what we're doing you can hold in your head pretty well and do it more intuitively. But if you are struggling, this is exactly what's happening here, is that I am dividing in that 5x cubed on each of these terms, and then what I'm left with gets put in parentheses, right? Because that's just how we would write that, like when we have the numbers. Same way. So now on this one, again, maybe try it on your own. You could do it as classwork. So pause the video. So we have 8a cubed b squared plus 16a squared b cubed plus 20a cubed b cubed. So if you want to do this one again, just pause and try it out. Your GCF is the first thing we want to find. So GCF would be, let's see, we have an 8, 16, and a 20. So it's going to be 4 for the number part. We have an a cubed to the 2nd and cubed. So it's going to be a squared, smallest one. And then my b squared. Okay. So now I'm going to divide that in, that's gonna stay 4a squared b squared. And I'm going to show you how to just kind of skip over that cumbersome second step. You can just jump right here. I just set up my, parenthesis here. So I think 4a squared b squared times what gives me 8a cubed b squared. So that would be 2. And an a and the b squared's all set. Then carry down my plus. Then I have what would I need to multiply by to get 16a squared b cubed. That would be 4b. Would give me this back. And then carry down my plus. And then the next one, 4 times, I would have a 5. And then a squared times a to get the a cubed, and b squared times b to get the b cubed. And then make sure you close your parentheses. And that is your answer. So let's make sure we are marking our answers really clearly on these. That's important because whenever you have these multiple step things with verifications, a lot of times it's hard for me to actually tell. And then you could, what your answer is versus your verification. So we definitely want to write that out. So this is verify. You can just write that for me. And it just helps me to grade quicker. So I'm just multiplying back. I really already did this in my head as I was going. So you maybe just do this part at first, but after a while you'll get the idea. Okay. So that's part 1 for this video set on greatest common factor. I'm going to do part 2 for the next set starting page 91 of your workbook. So get that ready. That'll be on factoring out like a binomial being a greatest common factor, and we'll do some factor by grouping, which is probably a very new concept. So I just want to make a separate video on that. So have a great day.